Welcome to the Empowered Eating Disorders podcast. We cover topics that may be triggering for some people to listen to, specifically in relation to mental health and eating disorders.
Hi, my name's Ruth and I'm one of the experts by experience with the Empowered Forum. The Empowered Forum is part of a lead provider collaborative with Cheshire and Wirral Partnership. It's about making changes and improving services for adults with eating disorders. And I'm joined by two other lovely experts by experience today. I've got Tish and Amanda with me. If you guys want to say hi.
Hi, I'm Tish. I'm an expert by experience at Empowered.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm a volunteer with Empowered.
And we're going to talk, Tish and Amanda are going to talk today about comorbidities in the context of eating disorders. So I'm going to sort of hand over to you guys. If you want to tell us what that sort of means, in terms of what is a comorbidity.
Yeah, a comorbidity is when you have like multiple diagnoses or something and you are struggling with multiple things, not like we don't just have an eating disorder or you don't just have depression or you don't just have autism. And it's a way of managing them all together and working as a holistic view rather than one separated from another in isolation. And it's all about working collaboratively with professionals about them and different teams. So yeah,
it's a lot more complicated than just you have this diagnosis, you have this one. Actually you have to think about them together, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, when I was diagnosed as being autistic, it completely changed everything for me. I was with the eating disorders for a year before I was diagnosed as being autistic, and it just changed everything, and it helped me so much in my recovery, because I became, instead of like masking and thinking that I needed to control food, I understood who I was then, so it helped a lot.
Yeah, and I can resonate with that because I'd been inpatient about 4 times, and the last inpatient admission I was at actually had my autism diagnosis then, which in the previous ones I hadn't, and the previous admissions weren't helpful, and they would just treat my eating disorder. And when they actually found out I was autistic and they worked with my autism as well, I've never been back into hospital, and it's been the best kind of admission I'd ever had, and they understood what I was about and understood me and my struggles. And I think they looked at me not just as having an eating disorder but having autism as well, and also having like I have OCD and depression and all of these things, and working in isolation is not helpful, because all that happens is that you're trying to fix one thing, but then there's other things that interlink. They're all interlinked together, and there's not just one fits one and then the other is the same. It's just different.
Yeah, it should be person-centred, but I've had like psychiatrists say to me, well, what's the point in having an autism diagnosis, because what's it going to change? And it changed everything, so they were completely wrong.
That's a huge misunderstanding
definitely.
Of comorbidities.
That's why they've got the experts in to try and teach them what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, and I think it's very difficult to have autism and an eating disorder, because there's so many, like you have sensory difficulties with like textures of different foods and smells, and that obviously tackling an eating disorder is very hard, because when professionals saying, oh, you need to eat this food and maybe you don't like the texture of it and it completely disgusts you and you want to crawl out of your skin because you just can't cope with it panics you, and then they're saying, well, no, this is your eating disorder talking, it's not your autism. And it's like, well, no, we need to believe that we have sensory difficulties, and I think professionals can sometimes forget that.
I can completely relate to that. I mean, I was told to eat certain foods that I've never liked, but they didn't believe me, and they said, oh, that's your eating disorder, and I was like, but it's not.
Yeah, and both of you were diagnosed after you'd got into treatment for eating disorders.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you'd had that diagnosis before and clinicians had that understanding, that would have made quite a big difference. What kind of differences?
I think that if I'd have got, like support for being autistic before I developed anorexia, I don't think I would have had an eating disorder, to be honest. because it was like a strategy to control my life. Whereas if I knew that I was autistic before I developed anorexia, I probably wouldn't have had an eating disorder. Apart from that, I do have ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, but that's part of my autism, and I don't generally class that as an eating disorder, to be honest. But it's something that I can work around. I just eat my safe foods and what I like. So.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to have safe foods. And when you're talking about eating disorders with professionals, they say, oh, you have fear foods and safe foods. But if you're autistic, safe foods can be a sense of, its structure, its routine. You know what to expect. And we autistic people hate the fear of the unknown. They like to know what's going to happen. And the fact that they know that this food is safe, they know they like the texture, the smell, the taste, everything like that. It just gives less anxiety when they're around meal times, when it's already stressful enough.
Just that language, isn't it? Just that language change with an understanding of someone also having autism. The language of safe and unsafe food suddenly has a completely different meaning.
Yeah.
And so if clinicians were aware of that, because I don't know how many clinicians on inpatient wards have much of an understanding of autism, or if they have access to that information.
Well, when I did get diagnosed, they didn't really ask me about my safe foods. I literally had to say, I don't like this, I don't like that. And I remember being in my inpatient setting, they have no kitchen, and I'm gluten and lactose intolerant, so there was only one thing I could eat at that kitchen, which was hummus.
Right.
And I don't like the texture of hummus because it's smooth and gritty and it's got a little bits in, but I had to face that every single lunchtime, and I felt awful after it. So there needs to be more kind of awareness and they need to adapt to people with autistic needs, because it's not right to face a food that you fear all the time every lunchtime, and it was really difficult. So you're
already in treatment for an eating disorder, and having to deal with that on a daily basis is difficult enough.
It's just going to cause so much more trauma in the long term.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I think another part of being autistic is you struggle with your interoception. So I struggle with knowing when I'm hungry, but I also do struggle with knowing when I'm full. So sometimes it can be like I can go without eating and not realise I'm hungry. Other times I'll eat and then not realise I'm full. So and that's also scary when you suffer from anorexia, because if your body's not telling you when you're full and you keep eating, it just terrifies you.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Especially when you're in recovery.
Yeah. What do you think what are the things that clinicians, or not just clinicians on wards, like GPs, all those different healthcare professionals, what do you think would be the best thing, or some of the best things they could do in order to improve practice sort of in this area?
I think having more training in, like GPs having more training, nurses having more training, and being more aware that the distinguishing between each thing, and that the eating disorder is not the same as your autism, and that they're not using it as an excuse. They need to be believed, like the clinicians need to believe the person that's speaking, because I think they just think we're gonna say anything to not eat, and that's not the case. And I think also just being more adaptive towards it. So having these, so like when I again was in the hospital, it needs to be aware that sound and noise is a very noisy environment. But we need to have rooms that are further away from the main entrance where everything's happening, or noise cancelling headphones would be available, lots of things available for them, not that and the clinicians need to take ownership of that, rather than it all relying on the individual to do it all, because
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's a thing about that though, about I think they put it down to the people on the units, asking them what they prefer, and I think they said it'd be unfair for the neurotypicals if they gave the autistic people special treatment. And I thought, oh, well, we can't help being autistic.
No, it's levelling the playing field. That's equity. That's
Yeah.
bringing everybody to the same sort of level where they can all access treatment in the same way.
And I suppose it's not just the environment, it's also, I find that I like specific cutlery, but on an eating disorders ward, apparently we have to have their set cutlery, so
Yeah,
I generally eat everything with a teaspoon.
Yeah.
I know what you feel like, because I have specific plate and bowls for each breakfast, lunch, dinner, and if I can't have that, I get really stressed, and it's like all my routine's thrown off and everything like that. I have different spoons, and I remember saying, can I take my own cutlery, and they said no. They said, why? Because no one else can do that. I was like, but we're not
It's something that will help you, so
Yeah.
why not let you have it?
Yeah, it's and they're all. Some of these things are quite small, aren't they? They're like, you know, they don't feel small, but in terms of changes that a ward could make, you know, allowing someone, or even if you say, well, we can't bring in cutlery from home for whatever reason, maybe for health and safety reasons, is there something we can then provide that's very similar? You know, what a small change, but it just helps you guys feel more comfortable and then be able to engage a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think there's something around, and you tell me if I'm wrong, you know, this is something that's popped into my head around the different clinicians, different professionals communicating with each other. Because often you'll have one person you might see for an eating disorder, you'll have one person you might see around autism, OCD, depression. What's the communication like between those professionals?
Well, I recently went to an eating disorders and personality disorders conference, and from what I've heard, there's no communication, really. There might be a bit, but not really. And I said, why not have, you know, you have an NHS app, and it says your consultations, why not have that sort of thing for the services where one service can read what the other service has done? So I just don't understand it. Surely that would be a simple way of doing things, but apparently it's too hard.
It's like, why can't they email each other? And you know, you're all under the same care, the same people, and it's like there needs to be a collaborative work. Like, otherwise we're not just one thing and one thing here and one thing there. We're, as an individual, we're made up of loads of different feelings, emotions, issues, and I think what's important is that it all gets treated together, because as I say, they're all interlinked and nothing's separate from each other, but I just don't think there's that communication there at the moment. And a lot of things that I struggled with like my OCD, people were like, but it went through with my eating, and I was like, well, yeah, because they're interlinked. Like, control with OCD is also I've got control with my eating disorder, I've got control with my autism, and control's a big thing, but they didn't realise that control was due to my autism and my OCD. It was just like, oh, you need to control what you're eating because you have an eating disorder, and it's like, well, that's not the case.
And without that communication, one clinician might suggest something that's the opposite of another one, and you're right, everything knits together. We're like jigsaw puzzles or patchwork blankets, you know. That whole thing is made up of all of these small things.
I think one of the problems is a lot of these, especially with neurodiversity, they overlap each other. So I'm currently on the waiting list to be diagnosed with ADHD, but I have a fear that they'll be like, well, that's overlapping with your autism. And there's so many different things that it's like, what's what?
Yeah, because I'm also on the waiting list for ADHD, the diagnosis, and it is worrying because you think like, oh no, they've already diagnosed you with autism, that means you can't have ADHD. And then like, well, that's not the case.
Yeah,
It's like,
a lot of
you might
people
be
that
lying.
There's a high percentage of people that have been diagnosed as being autistic will have ADHD as well.
And getting those diagnoses is helpful. I mean, I'm making an assumption that it helps you to understand yourself more in that way. And I think just from hearing what you guys have been saying around people considering you as a whole person made up of all these different parts and not compartmentalizing, not putting them in different boxes. If that weren't to happen, you know, then would that have an impact on recovery time or being able to engage in treatment itself?
I think so, because I wouldn't know where to start, what I was feeling, because having autism, sometimes we don't know how to express our emotions or know what we're actually feeling, and so it would take us a longer time to recover, I would say, because we don't have an understanding of ourselves. If we don't have an understanding of ourselves, how are we going to have an understanding of what we struggle with and why we struggle with food or why we struggle with control? And I don't think I would be in this position now, a year hospital free, if I have the diagnosis of autism, OCD, getting a diagnosis of ADHD, because understanding yourself is such an integral part of recovery.
Yeah.
Definitely. I completely agree. I mean, I suffer with emotional dysregulation, where you just, all your emotions come at once and it's absolutely horrible and you just want it to end, but you just have to ride it out and know that it's not going to last forever.
Yeah. It's a huge part of understanding yourself, but also I suppose that what we want people to take away from it is, for clinicians, for healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, even people outside of medical field, if it's a school teacher, if it's a college professor, if it's, you know, a friend, to understand that no, there's no one way to treat each person. There's every single person needs an adapted approach, a holistic, like you said, and both of you have said holistic, person-centered, consider everything about me in order for me to be able to access that treatment.
Also, I think sometimes clinicians are scared of doing the wrong thing. You get some clinicians that are like, I know everything, and I've treated someone with autism before, I know how to treat you, and it's like, well, we're all different people, you know. Everyone's different, neurotypicals are different, and I think some others on the other hand are scared. In case, you know, because they don't know how to treat you.
Or they're scared because it's not their field, so they don't want to take any accountability for it because they don't know. But there should be more because it's so common to have multiple diagnoses of things. They should have experience with multiple things, not just one area.
Or have the wherewithal to communicate with those other professionals, because I think you're right. I think the chances of someone being in treatment who only has an eating disorder is probably quite slim. It's probably quite rare. You know, I think there's a lot more. And for you guys are both examples of going into treatment and then having a further diagnosis after being in treatment, and I think that's happening quite a lot, where we're uncovering all of these different things, and because we're seeing that trend happen more and more, the need for that joined up working, the need for that wider understanding is even more necessary now. It's always been necessary, but the change needs to start happening.
Yeah, definitely.
If you've lived experience of eating disorders and are over the age of 18, you can join the Empowered Experts by Experience Forum and help us influence and shape eating disorder services across the Northwest. Learn more on our website, www.empowerednw.nhs.uk.